Welcome to the Bot Crazy podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome to Shit Crazy podcast edition. As it turns out, I've got my friend Brittany Carroll joining us, and consequently, she had me on her podcast, the Automation Happy Hour, as her first guest, and so I couldn't think of any more appropriate guest to have on the show here as we kind of start running down this road and really start kind of pulling in some people from the industry, talking about kind of their background, where they're from, and we're all kind of figuring this out a little bit on the first, maiden voyage here. So don't be surprised if you see my eyes wander down to some notes and everything. But we're going to kind of get it going here. So, Brittany, first of all, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate having you on.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, I was excited that you invited me. Keep the podcast rolling. So now this is my second podcast.
That's right, because you'll have this. By all means, take it, spread it around, do your thing, and it's weird how you do get better at them as they go. Somehow, it seems like it should just be a straightforward thing, but the more you do them, it does seem to work better.
A little bit more natural for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I kind of want to get started with just kind of discussing your background a little bit. I know when I was on your podcast, you and I talked, and we were both formerly bartenders and kind of run a funny path into the automation world. Can you kind of describe what that journey was like for you? Let the kind of viewers get to know your story.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I was a bartender for a good majority of my 20s at a couple different restaurants, bartended, served, kind of floor managed, did all that. And then I had kids. So I went part time working in events, a banquet facility actually, at a brewery that's local to Chicagoland area. So I did that for a few years, running weddings, booking corporate events, weddings, all sorts of large scale, um, I guess, events. So I did that.
Busy
And then,
stuff.
yeah, it was busy, some late nights, with weddings and a lot of stress. But I loved it. It was great. I moved on to more event jobs, a couple of different event jobs, one at a big bowling company. And then the last catering gig I had was a local company to Naperville. Um, and I did their corporate catering. And then the pandemic hit. So um, obviously, corporate catering just wasn't going to be a viable job anymore. So I was furloughed for quite a few months, and it was probably the best few months with my kids ever because we had the summer to just be together and enjoy each other. And then I realized, yeah, I gotta find a new path and a new career. And I knew I wanted to stay in sales. Um, but I wanted something that was going to be pandemic proof. I needed to be able to work from home and have that flexibility. So I actually got hired on with a belt manufacturing supplier, so V belts and timing belts, and worked there for almost 2 years. And it was awesome. It was great. Learned a lot and realized that I love the manufacturing industry. And it just was a totally different feel. And the customers were so much easier to approach. And being a woman too in the industry, I thought it almost felt like it gave me a little bit of a leg up because it was a lot of men, and you weren't cold calling people and getting a really bad response. It was mostly positive. So I liked that. So
And
yeah, and then it brought me to Iris. So I actually decided that manufacturing with belts wasn't really my thing. And I wanted something a little bit more exciting and something that I felt like was helping, you know, had a little bit more of I guess, added value to my life, if that makes any sense.
sure.
Um, so automation turned out to be where that fit, and I absolutely love it. I love working for Iris, and the company as a whole is awesome. But the industry itself, you really feel like you're helping not only create better jobs for people in manufacturing, but for companies that aren't able to get people or that are struggling to um, keep up with production or whatever the case may be. It's just been really, really fulfilling.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, there's so many things you touched in on in there that I could want to pick your brain about. I'm going to start with the least important one that came to my mind, and that is this has been driving me nuts, particularly since the pandemic and everything. What does it mean to be furloughed? I could look it up, but I'd rather what does it mean?
So what I was told when I first got furloughed, it was that you're not laid off, so you still have your job, but they're not going to pay you. And I think I didn't get benefits from that job. I use my husband's benefits, but I believe if you're furloughed, you can still collect your insurance and benefits through the company, but they're just not paying your salary. So then you're able to qualify for unemployment.
Interesting. So the idea is basically you keep your position, you don't get paid, but you still get to keep your benefits and you can get unemployment.
Yep. So yeah. So when I was furloughed initially, the idea was I was going to be coming back, right? So it was like, hey, in a month we'll kind of see where we're at, and obviously, in April of 2020, it wasn't any better, and May wasn't any better in June. So yeah.
Yeah,
So eventually, I didn't actually get laid off. I ended up just quitting because I knew it wasn't going to be. I think eventually they would have had to let me go, but they were being really gracious and optimistic that I would be able to come back.
sure. The writing was kind of showing up on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now you're with one of the most dynamic, automation firms that I know of, particularly with Rob at the helm at Iris Custom Solutions. And now straighten me out because I know I've got, Iris Custom Solutions and Iris Factory Automation. Is that kind of two views on the same thing, or am I just splitting hairs there on the nomenclature?
So no, we started as Iris Custom Solutions. So back in 2013, when Rob fell, and his business partner at the time, founded Iris. It was custom integration. So they did a lot in vision inspection and custom integration. And then about 5 years ago, we kind of turned to more robotics. So we're pretty much 50-50. We still do a ton of vision solutions or machine vision solutions. But now we do a lot in robotics. And so we changed our name to Iris Factory Automation just to have a better story to tell. Custom solutions just is so broad, but having Iris Factory Automation, it just makes it a little bit easier for people to understand what we actually do.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. And it, I mean, one of the things that we're and talk about Iris for days, I feel like. But you touched on, I feel like, a really important point coming from, the hospitality industry, which is generally, I mean, it's high pressure, it's off hours, it's a relatively thankless job. I feel like a lot of times.
Yeah.
Um, and but it can be really enjoyable too. You get it seems to me in my experience anyways, it's a job of extreme highs and lows, um, and also a lot of like you said, you got so much of that personal interaction, and it is a very different clientele from it's a very different clientele experience. The customers are a much different breed than when you're working in some place like in a manufacturing setting, in a sales setting with something like an automation firm, like you are with Iris. um, if it I have to feel or have to imagine that was like night and day for you.
You would think, but it's kind of, I think the transition from doing weddings and more social events and then going to corporate was a great transition to then go into the manufacturing space, because corporations, the way that they purchase pretty much any large asset or event or whatever they're doing, it kind of has a very similar um, like events, right? So you do proposals. It's a lot of the same things are going on, and a lot of the interactions are similar. But honestly, it's just being social. I love meeting new people and learning about different aspects of their lives and their business. And so I think for me as a person, it was easy. It was an easy transition because I just really am interested in learning and diving into this industry. So it came really naturally.
Sure. Well, and I suppose you make a good point. The sales process, almost no matter where you go, the sales process is the same. If
Sure.
there's accelerated, there's very condensed versions of it in some industries and some sales industries in particular. But in the end, the steps, the process is pretty much the same everywhere you go.
Right. I mean, the sales cycle for events versus automation is very different because, like, time wise, because usually someone's booking a corporate event, they're going to have that booked within like 2 months. Where, like, they're buying a piece of capital equipment, it could be 2 months, it could be a year. So, that is probably the biggest learning curve for me because I'm like, all right, where are we? Are we ready? And it just doesn't move that quickly. There's a lot
Yeah.
more boxes to be checked, internally for large corporations that they don't need for some smaller investments.
Well, and in your shoes, when you're selling that, that whole custom solution, I know you can get into. This happened a lot when I was an integrator. You get into those negotiations over terms and pricing and payment terms and warranties and extended warranties and spare parts and service and all that, and you can that just lengthens it out more. And don't get me wrong, I know some people, and maybe you're like this. Some people really dig that, those kind of really complex sales routes, or maybe complex is the wrong word. You could just say more involved sales routes and consulting routes, where I know with the right mindset, you can kind of look at that as just getting to know your customer better, figuring out their needs better, and just that much more enjoyable to dig in and figure those things out. Do you run into that more in this role with some of your customers that you're working with now?
So when I first started with Iris, I was more of an inside sales role. So that's kind of where I work alongside our business development manager, Carl, to do the spares parts, to, kind of do more of those tedious, um, you know, uh, I can't even think of
Kind
the
of the
word.
everyday, like, tasks, the ankle
Yeah.
biter stuff that you gotta get taken care of for customers and all.
Right. Yeah. And I don't love that part of it, to be honest.
I don't think you're alone.
Yeah, I don't think anybody loves that in a sales position, but it's a necessary evil. So we get it done. Now my role is channel partner manager. So I'm more actually working with our distributor partners, our supplier partners, and it's really great because we're kind of just a team. So Carl and I and Rob really work together. So Rob's really good about handling kind of the accounting side of things and the negotiation. When we're close to getting that sale closed, he really steps in and helps with that. Carl is awesome working with end users, and then I work with our partners to make sure they have collateral, make sure they have information that they need, be available to do joint calls, all that kind of stuff. So really getting the start of the sale going with our partners, and then Carl takes on, once it's really an opportunity, and then Rob kind of helps at the end if we need him, to close. So it's really fun to work as a team, and sometimes Carl's doing spare parts, sometimes I'm doing spare parts now, because we're a small organization. We kind of all just work together.
Sure. Yeah. There we go. For a second, I thought I lost my camera feed. No, that's it's interesting that you say that too, because I won't. It'll be my first opportunity to get the three of you in a room here next week. And actually get. I mean, I've worked with all three of you individually, and now I'll get my first chance to get the three of you in a room next week. But it's funny because I can already tell that you guys just seem to have good chemistry. Um, that seems to be very apparent.
Yeah, I think we definitely do. I really really enjoy working with both Carl and Rob, and they bring a lot of different things to the table. So for me, learning in this industry, and I get a lot of information and great tools from Rob. He's got 20 plus years of experience, and Carl has a lot of experience in the packaging world. Before he was with Iris, so they both bring a lot to the table, and I think I bring a little bit of a different. Just the way that am a salesperson, I'm very relationship. I have a very relationship sales approach, and I think that complements them nicely.
I would believe that. And that kind of that really is a great segue into kind of what I wanted to kind of make the next topic. And you touched on it in kind of our sort of opening dialogue. And that is when you mentioned being a woman in the industry. And this is interesting to me because I grew up with I was the youngest of five kids working at my dad's company, and all three of my older sisters worked there too. And my older brother. So I got to see kind of, industries that were I don't necessarily like the word male dominated because that might kind of makes it sound like they're like closed, like they're exclusive. It doesn't. I mean it in the sense that obviously, just by the numbers, there are way more men in those industries than women, just by the numbers. So they are, by the numbers, it is a male dominated industry. And you mentioned it was funny. What are some of the things that you've noticed, like quirks or differences, being a woman coming into an industry that is just so chock full of dudes all the time?
So I think it's kind of interesting just from my background because, in hospitality, like as a bartender, it's a lot of men, right? You're serving a lot of men, so you're used to talking to men all the time. And then going into banquets and weddings, it's pretty much women. Like all of the salespeople are women. So I went
Never
from
thought
like
of
kind
that.
of one, and then now into this industry where it's mostly men. Um, I actually like it. I like the dynamic. Iris is unique in that we have quite a few women that work for Iris. So, coming to work every day, it's not like I'm the only woman in the office. That two of our team leads are women. So that's really cool. But most of the customers that we have and the salespeople that I work with are men, and um, I find that there are some instances where, you kinda get drowned out a little bit, where, like, maybe people don't let you talk, or maybe they assume you don't know what you're talking about. I've had that a little bit, but primarily, I feel like it's been really great, and most men are very respectful, and, I think you do have to pay a little bit of dues too when most of the people I work with, as partners, they know Rob and Carl. They've known Rob and Carl for a long time. So, it's just getting people used to calling me and talking to me about opportunities and, coming to me when they need, something from Iris. So it's just been a little bit of a transitional period, but I think overall it's it's been great. And I think most men are very respectful, and I think it a lot of men are happy to talk with a woman instead of having it always be a guy. So that's just my take on how it's been so far.
Well, I'm glad to hear that's been your experience, and I'd like to think that that's true as well. That I especially in this industry in particular, I've worked in others where maybe I couldn't say that's the case, and I definitely have known some women who I've known very well that have not had that experience in either very particular companies or kind of generalized into an industry. I have seen that happen. I
Mm,
have not seen it in this industry so much. Everybody in automation and this type of technology sort of driven industry, at least in my experience, has been pretty pro. They're pretty professional people. Um, and I really think, for what it's worth, I think that you're right when you talk about like um guys, we're always when you're in this industry, it's like you're always talking to guys all the time. And don't get me wrong, that's fun and whatever, but it is nice when a woman comes along, not because it's like, oh, yay, there's a girl around, as much as just they bring a different energy. They bring a different vibe. They bring a different take on things. And that balance can be really, quite frankly, can be really refreshing a lot of times, to have that take, have that energy around. I feel like it balances things out, and it can, quite frankly, um, I feel like it can help you see things that maybe you'd miss otherwise, quite frankly. Have you noticed that, the industry can, or even in any of your travels here in the industry, any of your experiences where there's been kind of even maybe a really, I don't know if need is the right word, but once you find it, that there's been a strong itch for that sort of feminine approach?
yeah, I think in my last job, I think that all the salesmen were men, and they brought in, my position was called distribution coordinator, and so all the coordinators were actually women that they hired initially, and it was a new position. And I think the company found that it changed a lot of the dynamic for the better, right? Like the organization, not that women are only the ones that are organized, but I think that sometimes, women bring a different organizational level to the job, and there is a different we just see things a little bit differently sometimes, and I think that they really saw that in that role. And Rob, at Iris, has said since I started, he's like, women just do better sometimes than men, which I thought was funny. Like, he's like, they just do a better job. um, and that's coming from him. I don't know. I mean, I think it's all based on like who you are as a person and what your drive is and everything. But that's what he's seen in his years of experience. So I'll take his word for it.
I'm gonna go ahead and agree with him. Like it's not. I had some Coca Cola before before we started this. So I have to clear my throat all the damn time. I never drink soda. I'm gonna go ahead and agree with them. My wife is about a bajillion times more organized than me, and the thing is, she can do it without trying. You know, she's at her slacking off level of organization is my like I'm working real hard level, and I don't think it's I don't think it's out of line to say that as a general rule, and of course there's always exceptions,
Sure.
but women are generally more uh, tedious, diligent, and organized than men. You know,
I wonder if there's something behind that. I think society and maybe just biologically, we're trained to have to juggle a lot of things. And it's not, I don't think the men in our lives don't necessarily make us do that, but I think that we just do, right? Like, I'm juggling in my brain at all times, like two kids' schedules, my husband's schedule, my schedule, customers, opportunities. It's like it it's something that's just ingrained in you that you have to do, and you just do it. I mean, I'm not probably the most organized person, as far as like my closet isn't, organized by color, and I'm not like, I don't have my shoes like perfectly aligned, but as far as
you
like,
don't turn the light switch on and off 20 times before you go to bed
no,
and
I'm
have
like the most
spaces.
opposite from OCD in that sense. But like organization, as far as like your life and what you have to do every day, is just like, you just have to do it, right? So you just get it done.
See, I've heard there's a couple things on that. So one, it's interesting that you say, where does that come from? So where I have in my studies where I have learned that this comes from is that because if you go back to the caveman days when the men were hunting and the women were gathering and taking care of the kids, it was important for men basically had to wander off and focus on one thing. Okay, well, two things. One, where's the animal I got to kill so we can eat? And two, where's the animal that's trying to kill me so I don't get eaten? And the women, well, they would go out and say, okay, there's fresh berries over here on this place. Can't take them all because if you do, then you're not going to eat them in time and they'll spoil. And there's another thing over here. Oh, at these plants over here, though, these are poisonous, and they had to compartmentalize all that. So there was more data processing and storage in more compartments that they were actually keeping track of. They were actually keeping track of, and then back to the kids while the guy's out, trying to not get eaten and find something to eat. And so the tasks were a little bit different. I know that's a theory. I don't.
Sure.
No one's really gonna prove that. But the other thing that I thought was interesting that you said about that was I don't feel like either of us in the genders can stop our innate nature. I don't even know that it'd be good if we could, because I know what you talked about, like you're juggling your kids' schedules, your husband's schedule, customer stuff in your head. And I know obviously when you're, working at home or when you're a working mom, that's a lot of crap rolling around in your head. I mean, that's just a lot of stuff. And I know I've tried to like take that role off of my wife before. Be like, "Oh, I'll jump in, I'll help with the groceries, whatever." And it's like she might entertain that for a minute, but then she can't. Like she's got to be the one that does it.
Yeah.
I can't take that, It's like so I feel like it's almost, it's as much a compulsion sometimes. You feel that way?
So, yeah, I've let go of a lot. My husband, I'm really lucky because my husband pretty much cooks like every meal when he's home, and he cleans, and he's always been, and he goes to the grocery store. He probably goes to the grocery store more than I do. Um, but I guess what the difference is for me is it's not necessarily about the tasks that you do around the house. It's about the mental struggle of like, what am I missing? Oh, I didn't get to go to my child's, football game. I want to, make sure I can volunteer once in a while in the school. I want to make sure I have to make sure they get their homework done. Even though my husband will check on that, like I want to make sure, that they're doing well in school. Do they get their doctor's appointments? Do they go to the dentist? Like, do they get enough play dates? Or they hang out with their friends? Like, it's all of these things that it's more like that I want to make sure that I'm still providing for my kids, even though I'm at work 40 hours a week or more. Right. So, and I think there's that struggle of, in the back of your mind, you're like, I feel like I'm screwing up somewhere. And actually, Shonda Rhimes, I don't know if you know who she is. Um,
Oh, I've
she's
I've watched I've watched me some Scandal.
okay, and like Grey's Anatomy too.
I didn't watch that one, but me and my wife got, especially the first couple seasons of Scandal, like we started watching that when it first came out, and we had like a binge marathon of it, and we stayed up on it. It got way more out in left field in the later seasons, but man, them first couple, I'm not gonna lie, we were in deep. She had us hook, line, and sinker.
I actually just watched the entire Grey's Anatomy. I think I have like a few episodes left on the most recent season, but I never watched it when I was younger. And now I like in the last year and a half, I like watched all 17 seasons. It's like crazy. But
That's
besides,
17
it's
seasons.
really long. It's so good though. Like I I loved it. It's kind of a really
Wow.
good, like, just zone out, and I'm more of a show person anyways, like, I'd rather just watch, like, 1 or 2 shows and not a movie. So that was, like, my hobby for a year and a half.
So is Doc McStuffins gonna retire? What's his name? The
McDreamy?
Doc Doctor Hotbody? What? Yeah, okay, there you
Well,
go. That guy.
he was off the season for a while. He was off the show, and then he came back because he died in the show, but he came back, like, as in a when, Dr. Gray was in a coma last season. So, yeah, he appeared again, which was exciting for people. But, yeah, so that's besides the point, but Shonda Rhimes is an
I just sorry.
amazing woman. And she and I won't quote exactly because I don't know the exact quote, but she had said something about, at any point in time, you're you're excelling at one thing and you're failing at another. Or you're never gonna be able to be, the best in your career and like be there for all your customers and kill it, you know, all the time in your job and be like the best mom and be at every single thing. Like it's a balance. So sometimes you're going to be like the best mom and you're going to do all the things that you can do and you're going to be at every soccer game and you're going to, have your kids in all these activities or whatever is quantified as a great mom. I don't even know. I don't even think we can quantify it, right? But whatever in your mind is makes you a great mom. And then, it's one or the other. Like there's going to be a balance. Sometimes it ebbs and flows. So I took that really to heart because, you know, when I first had kids, I didn't see myself being like a career person. I was like, I'm going to be a stay, I'll work part time and, I'll be home with my kids. And I loved being home with the kids when they were babies. It was such a blessing to be able to do that. But now my focus is still on my kids, but I really am loving my career. And I think that's also great for my kids to see, right? Like that I have drive and that I work hard and I have goals and I have to work hard to get to those goals. So it's interesting. It's interesting how your life takes you from one place to another and just trying to figure out how to balance it all.
Would you I have a question right on the heels of this. What you're saying reminds me of something I've heard various mental health practitioners say, and that is essentially every decision involves a loss. Every every single decision you make involves a loss of some kind. You don't necessarily know what that's going to be until you make it, but to go right means you don't get to go left. To go left means you don't get to go right. To go straight means you don't get to go left or right. There's
Yeah.
every single decision involves a loss. And that is a perfect segue into the next kind of item or group we were going to talk about, and that's, would you say that you know keeping that line going of striking that balance between whatever, like you said, who can define it, whatever the appropriate amount of career pursuance and being there for your children and your family and everything, it's like striking that balance. Would you say that's one of the hardest parts about being a working mom, when you're working 40 hours a week and you still got those kids at home?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Because, I mean, you're a parent. So, sometimes you get home from work, you're just tired, like I've talked all day, my brain is wiped, and I just want like a few minutes to relax. But then you get home and you're like, well, I need to be mom now. And my kids only get 3 hours because my kids are 7 and 10. So they're still young enough where they go to bed by 8:30. And so then you have to be on for those 3 hours, and sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, right? So
Yep.
I try to, the weekends I try to have something that we're going to do together as a family, and or if it's just a board game or it's playing catch in the front yard or taking them to wherever, just
Sure.
something. And I think the expectation of moms is, it's kind of weird because I think the expectation is for our generation is so different than the expectation from like my parents or even before that, because we're expected to work. We're expected to be the Pinterest mom that, makes their kids like these crazy birthday parties and these all, like, I just feel like there's a lot of expectation. And maybe it's also where I live too, because I think there's different, Naperville is a pretty affluent area. And so there's a lot, I feel like there's a lot of moms that are able to do a lot of things because maybe they have nannies or they, don't have to work, or whatever the case may be. But, it's just trying not to focus on what other people are doing and what society is telling you should do, and really just try to be there for your kids and doing the best that you can. And I'm
Yeah.
honest with my kids. I'm like, sometimes I'm just not going to be a perfect mom because nobody's perfect. Just like kids aren't perfect. And I think that's a good lesson to teach your kids, is that, we all do the best that we can in every circumstance. And, sometimes it's not perfect, and we just try to do better the next time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think kids, if they don't figure it out quick enough, it's good to let them know that mom and dad aren't perfect either. I mean, you when they're little enough, maybe it's fun to keep the wool over their eyes for a little bit about maybe them thinking more than you do. But it's funny when you get older how quickly that illusion fades when you start having your own kids.
Yeah.
You learn your
Right.
parents didn't know shit. They were just making that shit up as they went along.
Right. I know it's funny. Like when you're like a high school kid, you think you're like, my parents are idiots, but then like, but they really know a lot about some things, but they really don't know everything about everything. Like you think your parents are, making rules to make you not have fun or whatever, you think as a high school kid. But it's like now when you're an adult, I'm like, man, nothing good does happen after midnight, like my dad always said, right? Like they're like stupid things like that. And
Yep.
then you hear about like the silly things that your parents said when you're younger, that like, hey, if you can't drive without shoes on, it's like there's like funny, I don't know if you've seen any of those like memes of like for the 90s kids and like the crazy things that the parents used to tell them that's like not even true. It's like illegal to drive with your shoes off. There was another one that I saw, and like
I
they're just,
remember that one.
or you can't drive with the lights on in the car or something like
Yeah, that
that.
oh, what a crock.
You're
My
gonna
parents
like,
got me on that one when I was little.
my parents did too. So it's like, yeah, they're just trying to figure out how they could tell you to do something or tell you not to do something without being the bad guy. I don't know.
And in a way that you'd comply in the most expedient fashion possible.
Right. So I do not. So you figure out when you become a parent that everybody's figuring out as you go. Um, but I hope that my kids can trust that I have their best interest in mind, right? So whether I'm right or wrong, my intentions are good.
I feel like for kids, the jury's out on that for a long time until they get old enough that, then that starts to come into focus. I feel like it takes a little bit of time, but they always come around. You mentioned where you live over in Illinois. I like to use the phrase, "It's a well-to-do area." Would that be would
Yeah.
that be accurate? I feel like that's more fun. Um, and it sounds like there's a kind of a, keeping up with the Jones syndrome that's whether it's easy to see or fall into. Do you notice that, especially as a mom? Do you notice that gnaw at you a little sometimes?
Yeah, so where I grew up was very similar to where I live now. It's only like 15 minutes apart. DuPage County as a whole is an amazing place to raise a family. The schools are awesome. It's There's parks. There's so much to do for families, but that does sometimes bring in another aspect. When there's money in a town, I think that there's a lot of people that they want to portray themselves in a certain way. And I didn't grow up like that. My dad was a fireman, my mom's a hairstylist, that, kind of more blue collar family, in a white collar town. So for me, I'm pretty used to it. I grew up like that. It's really, for me, I can kind of put a lot of that aside, and I know where a lot of my friends or peers, that I grew up with, that grew up in families that maybe had more money than our family did. I know what they've done in their lives since high school, and it's some of it's similar to what I've done, and or maybe they haven't had success at all. So I try to keep that in perspective of everybody's journey is their own journey, and I try to explain that to my kids. Our house is not the biggest house in our town by, oh my gosh, it's like probably one of the smaller houses, and I kind of, I don't mind it. I think that it's good for my kids to kind of see both. There's this, you can work up to this, or you can work and be happy at this too. You don't have to be a millionaire to have a good life, and you don't have to, just because you're not making $200,000 a year doesn't mean you're gonna have a bad life. So yeah, I don't know if, did that answer your question?
No, no, that's. I mean, there's not as much a. I mean, the question is yeah, that answers the question, and I'm also just kind of wondering like what it's. I know what it's like for me, in that I guess um I I feel like women get that worse in some respects, as a general. Again, I'm generalizing, but I feel like it's easier for women to fall into that, to get kind of hooked by that sometimes, because and at least for me, for the guys I know, most of them don't give a crap. you
Yeah.
know they just they seem to slough that off easier. And especially when you're working, when you're a working mom and you got 40, 50 hours a week you're putting in, plus travel, and you got kids at home and everything. I mean, it's really easy to get into that. um I don't want to call it hamster wheel of, it's not so much that as it is, it's easy to get into that gear of go 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 go, achieve 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 achieve. and
Mhm.
and I know, especially, one of the things I remember, this class I took in college, one of the professors, it was a husband and wife that taught it, and they said that, and it was about gender studies, more or less. And one of the things that was interesting was one of the professors said the harshest criticism any gender gets is from their own gender.
Oh yes,
And
100%.
yeah, yep. And I have noticed my wife, she's on like a couple moms group on Facebook and stuff, and she's told me about a couple of outliers, like some of the stuff that a couple of these women will say, or the way that they, or not even just the ones necessarily that that are outliers that do say so, and they are outliers that have cruddy things to say. They're not the norm, but I'm been very aware of how much women are sensitive or aware of that kind of possible judgment from other women too, other moms and stuff. I know that they can get just very aware of that and be like, "Man, boy, oh, well, that the way that lady's raising her kids," or if that, "Oh, well, we have our kids in the Walton and Waldorf, whatever the hell program, I don't know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
for the specially gifted or something,
It is,
Marley
yeah,
and
like,
Marley's.
how can you kid the conversation like, it's funny, I
Thank you for
can't
saving that, by the way. I was at the risk of a long rambling session if you didn't stop me. So, and it was going to go nowhere.
I saw where you're going, though, I saw where you're
Thank you.
I no, I think there is that, like I think 100%, and I'm guilty of it, I think women in general, judge sometimes it's almost like you want to buy that outfit not to make your husband think that you look cute in it, but like to make sure you look cute in front of the other moms. It's kind of a
Yes.
silly. It's. I think there's a lot of reality to that, and I don't think every woman's like that, but I fall into it sometimes, and I kind of hate it. It's like, why do you care? I'm one of the youngest moms in like our school. And my kid's 10, my oldest kid's 10, and I'm still one of the younger, for my 7-year old, I'm still, one of the younger moms. So I feel like sometimes I don't necessarily fit in with some of the parents at the school or in our neighborhood, but I've gotten to the point where I don't really have the time or the energy to care that much anymore. I have my close friends and I have a lot of great family, and I just don't like that's all I need. I don't really need other people's approval. I think social media sometimes it's a trap too of, you see so and so doing this or going on this vacation, and you can tend to, you know, compare or whatever the case may be. But I've tried to become more aware of that and realize that what you see is not always what the reality is either. Every family, every person has their own, struggles and their own lives that aren't necessarily portrayed on social media, and they're not necessarily portrayed when you meet them in face to face either. So, you know, I'm aware everybody's journey is different. So I'm trying, not always perfect, but I'm trying to keep that in perspective.
Well, sure. And do you do you feel like, like you say, you kind of got to that point where, you know, you you finally can maybe be free of some of the give a crapping about, I'm coining that word right now, about, what other people are thinking, and and I've heard from, you're not the first woman I've heard from that, when, if a gal dresses up nice or something when you're going out to eat, or gets her makeup and everything, it's not, maybe it's some, to look cute for whatever for her husband, but some of it's to look, competitively cute for the other girls out there. I know my sisters have told me that. Do you feel like turning the corner around that is kind of a milestone in your life?
Yeah. I mean, I think I turned that milestone a while ago as far as like comparing. I think now at this point, like I just like to look nice and I want to look, I'm doing it more for me, right? I'm trying to make it not about anybody else, not about my husband, not about my kids, as far as, I don't have anybody to show off for. I just want to feel good about myself, right? So whatever that is, if that's, wearing sweats sitting on the couch and, snuggling, watching a movie with my kids, and that helps me feel good. Is it doing something nice for someone that I don't know? Is it, dressing up and going to, a party? Things that I want to do in my life. Life's short, right? Like I want to experience as much as I can and be as happy as I can for myself and for my kids and for my family. And worrying about what other people think, it's just not worth it's not worth the mental energy.
Well, it's a zero gain game. I
Right.
mean, there is virtually nothing to gain from it. It takes a while, I think, for people to learn that and really make peace with that. At least I know it's taken a. I would like to say it's taken a long time for me, but I don't. I wouldn't want to get so cocky as to say that I'm 100% there yet because I still struggle sometimes.
I
But
don't know if anybody can be 100% there, right? I mean, I think that's just human
wouldn't it be
nature.
nice if you could,
It could
you
be.
know?
It's nice to not like overthink everything, right? I think
Yeah,
it's not necessarily like I'm like worried about, what I look like, but it's more worried about, oh gosh, did I hurt their feelings? Did that come across okay? It's
yeah.
and I think that's okay to an extent, but it's also, your intentions, where your intentions are. If someone has a problem, then they should say something to you. They should talk about it to you. And if they don't, then it doesn't deserve space in your mind, in your worries.
I agree completely, and yet the fact that the 2 of us and we're not the first 2 I've heard say this in the last 7 days, um, the fact that the 2 of us say it out loud is is honestly just as much indication that it is something people struggle with,
Yeah,
you know? The fact that it gets conversation time tells you that people aren't so different, and it's if you're struggling with it and I struggle with it sometimes, and that doesn't mean eternally, but
sure.
struggle with it sometimes, then other people do too. It's just it's across the board probably.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's
And well, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. I think my I don't think
Were
anything
you going to do what I did?
ramble. Yeah, maybe.
Paint yourself into a corner quick and need someone to throw you a line.
Right.
So so I mean that's I don't. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how to tie that into the last thing that I really did want to cover with you, because I am interested in your take on, especially in kind of in our age group on, sort of the next generation that's coming into this sort of industry. And right now is no secret. I mean, I'm sure you hear it as much as I do. There's nobody to hire. The
Mhm.
people aren't there. You can't find them. Nobody can find people, and you see employers, really pulling out some stops that even the attitude shift that you see on LinkedIn. I saw a post the other day where somebody said, "Hey, remember all you out there looking for a job, you are the solution to someone else's problem," meaning an employer, not the other way around.
Mhm.
And I remember, when my parents were coming up, and probably your parents too, it was, man, you go into that job interview and basically you do what it takes to get that job. I don't care if you're looking at a job, flipping burgers or something, get that suit and tie on or whatever.
Mhm.
And that seems to have really shifted. And like I said earlier, you work for one of the more dynamic employers that I've met. Rob is he's a very dynamic guy. He doesn't really follow a lot of rules. He kind of carves out his own, and he's got a vision, and he likes to go that way. And
Yeah.
at least that's what he seems like. That's what I've seen.
Yeah. I
Um,
think you're right on.
yeah, and I mean that all in a good way.
Absolutely.
And so have you seen? What have you kind of seen coming up from the ranks as far as what employers have you noticed anything that they're doing kind of really really crazy to try to pull people in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm nervous for the future of companies, but I'm also nervous for the future of employees because I think there's a fine line between, a company that needs people and that wants to hire good people. So I think what's happening is there's a shift. So there's a lot of job openings, and I think the shift is companies are looking for their best person, and people are not. They want something from the companies. So there's like this power struggle of like either you're going to give me all these things, but to me, a lot of those employees are not necessarily the employees that you want. That like, okay, well, I want a limited PTO and I want to work from home and I never want to come into the office and I want this, and you know, you're also working for a company. There has to be give and take. There has to be structure. You know, so I feel like what Rob has done is a lot of companies can learn from that. Provide a work environment that people want to come to. Provide a a place where you can talk to your boss about something that's going on in your life and he'll understand. And there's no, if you need to leave at 3 o'clock because your kid fell off the monkey bars at school and is at the nurse's office, there's no question, right? You can go. These companies that are so stringent that are like, well, you get 2 weeks of paid time off. That's it. If you have to go to a doctor's appointment, you got to take 4 hours. If you have to do, if your kid gets hurt, you got to make up those hours. And it's so stringent. I don't think that can be the reality for a company that's going to be successful. There has to be boundaries. You have to be able to come to work and do your job and get your job done. But if you can get your job done in 36 hours and you're doing everything you're supposed to do and you want to take an hour off on a Friday, I think that should be a reasonable expectation for companies.
It sounds.
Obviously,
Go ahead.
it's going to be different in every industry. Like if you're in a manufacturing plant and you have to be on shift for, 8.5 hours, you can't do that. So I understand that. But I think there just we have to treat people like people and treat people as if, their job isn't the only thing in their lives, because I think people are realizing, and after the pandemic, they realize that, I'm happier when I'm able to have that, work-life balance with my family and my friends and whatever that is. I don't know what the right answer is. I just know what's worked for us, and being treated like a person and actually feeling like you're cared about and not as just, I've heard mixed feelings about this. Actually, I saw something on LinkedIn the other day. The guys said, if a company or if a boss says, "Oh, we're like family, you should run." But I honestly feel like family when I come to work. So not necessarily, Rob's never said like we're family, but when you feel that warmth when you come to work and you feel like you like the people that you work with and you like your boss and you feel like they treat you like a person, that feels like family, and you're with them a huge part of your life. So, you're not going to like everybody you work with, but I think if companies can provide a work environment that people want to come to, they're going to be successful. And companies that don't want to do that, I think that they're eventually not going to be successful.
It sounds kind of like what you're describing is sort of a a difference where employers sort of appreciate the spirit of the working arrangement rather than the letter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where hey, we need you, X amount of hours, um, and check this box, checks this box, and this box, and this box, every week, as opposed to kind of a more holistic approach of, are you getting the things done that we need done? Because like you said, there's got to be boundaries. The agreement goes both ways, and I've heard stories too recently. It's funny you mentioned where we've had some. I've heard about maybe younger groups coming in, and they've kind of had that attitude you talked about, like, well, I want 6 weeks of paid vacation, and then I want 2 weeks PTO on top of that, and I want to be able to, blah blah blah, just this and this, and the employers kind of say, we need people, but not that
Well, right.
bad.
You're like gone all the time. I just don't understand
Yeah.
how you can be productive and run, because when you're not there, someone has to cover that, right? So it's like being fair to your peers as well. Having that expectation from the company is, I kind of see, I guess, where people are coming from, but then to me, it's just very selfish, because like, okay, well, you get 6 weeks plus two, if you're getting 8 weeks of PTO, so is everybody else, right? And so now who's covering all those shifts, right? Who
Yeah.
are you willing to work extra time when you're there so that you can cover for your peers that are not there? I think that it's just not realistic. I think the unlimited PTO thing is also, I think it's a false reality too. It gives the employer the ability to say, yeah, we have an unlimited PTO policy, but if someone just takes off every Friday, or if they're only there 3 days a week, That's not realistic. It's not really unlimited PTO. There still has to be boundaries. So instead of just throwing it out there, say, you accrue this. If you work for the company, this is what you get. And then you can earn it. It's like anything in life. You can't just walk into a job and just expect to become president like 2 years later because, well, I came to work every day, I deserve it. I just think that, you know, you have to set expectations and people need to be able to work hard to get what they want as well. And it shouldn't just be handed to you. But if you work in an environment where the company treats you well in other ways, like Rob does a great job. He every once in a while he'll take you out for lunch, and it's not just me. It's, our controls team, the engineers, the guys in the shop. He makes it a point to talk to everybody, make sure that see their thoughts on, processes. And, he's always willing to take, to see your perspective, like, hey, I think it would be really good if we did this, or I think it would be great if we could implement this. I said, hey, we should have a Halloween party. He's like, yeah, great, we'll have a Halloween party. It's just like having everybody be part of the group and a part of the team, and feeling like you have some ownership in your day-to-day, in your work-life balance, in your career, is huge. You don't have to give it away. You don't just have to give people everything that they want.
Yeah, I agree. And do you feel like, or do you ever wonder if sort of the well's been poisoned by, I don't like to make it this, black and white, but I know when I was going into college, the message in high school, I'll be 39 in like a week and a half. The message in high school was, you got to go to college, you got to go to college, you got to go to college, and you're going to get out making, you're going to make a bunch of money when you get out of college, and employers are going to hire you up in a hurry. And I did not have that experience. Granted, I came out of college kind of at the wrong time, 2000, and I graduated in 2007.
Mm,
2008 was, right around the corner. So
yeah.
it was not a great time. But um, I noticed that I found out a lot of the things that they told me were going to just come true because I got this college degree and everything, and was able to walk into some company with it, did not pan out. Do you feel like some of the generations who are coming in for jobs right now have kind of been fed some of that same line and are paying a bit for it? Not to
100%.
make a loaded question. I mean, it's I guess I'm adding my bent into that question, but any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I think so. I didn't go to college, and I had to work my ass off to get to where I am. I had jobs that I didn't like, and kind of. So I think maybe my perspective is a little skewed because I'm like, you got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince, kind of thing. Um, I college is great for a lot of reasons. It's great because you can, it shows that you have the grit and determination to get through it, right? Does it teach you all the things you need to know in your career? Depends on what you went to college for, right? So, yeah, if you went to medical school, or if you went to law school, if you went to school to be an engineer, you're going to learn a lot of things that you need to have for your career. But there's a lot of degrees that people get that just don't translate well into the working world. And I think that it's unfortunate that, some of these high schools are pressuring these kids to go to college no matter what, when it's like they end up going to college for something that, one, maybe they don't even want to do, or two, it doesn't add any value to the job that they, or the field that they're going into. An arts degree is great, but like, if you decide to go into business, the arts degree doesn't do anything for you. And I know a lot of people from growing up that went to college and are not even in the field that they went to school for. It's just not realistic for an 18-year-old to say, hey, yeah, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I'm 34 and I think I just figured it out. It's just not realistic. And to spend that kind of money and not have the payback for it, I get it. I get why the frustration's there, 100%. And I think you're right. I think there is frustration with some of the younger generation that's getting out of college that maybe didn't go into the right field or is not happy with the salary that they were offered. However, it's not the employer's fault that colleges are charging an astronomical amount to go there, and that's their budget for, an incoming new role, new hire, someone that has zero experience in the field. You're not going to get paid, this top tier salary, and I just don't think it's realistic. And honestly, from my experience, and this is engineering and that stuff aside, because I don't have a experience in engineering, but in my experience in the sales world, some of the best qualified, best employees that I've ever worked with did not have college degrees, or their college degree wasn't in that field, and they just had a lot of experience working with people and working in general, right? Like I think some of these people, some people that maybe are from affluent areas, they're school. They don't work in high school. They don't work in college. And then they get out of college. They have zero experience working at all. And they maybe don't have as much value as someone that had experience working through high school and college, or didn't go to college and just worked their way up to that position. And in my opinion, they should probably be paid more because they have
Yeah.
that experience. They bring more to me. They bring more to the table.
Well, and I think that sales too also has the, kind of cool, attractive thing about it. And that I think sales will always be a bastion of meritocracy, because in sales, basically, if you win, you win, and you can work your way up in sales from nothing up to, if there's a political barrier, and by political barrier I mean a business political barrier of some sort where you can't get past the boss's job or whatever, you can still make as much money as you want if you can get good at sales. There will always be somebody who will take a very good salesperson,
Hmm.
so that I feel like that meritocracy is kind of built into sales, where in a lot of these other roles, like you said, um, they aren't necessarily that way. They're much more structured, and like you said, I will say, I will question, is an art degree that great? I don't know.
I didn't want to say that because I don't want to offend anybody, but
Nah, they're gonna send the letters anyways. Who cares?
yeah.
I'm
I
not
mean,
deliberately trying to offend anyone, but if you have an art degree and you're working in automation, come on. I mean,
unless you're like a designer, like if you're a mechanical designer, and I think it really,
we're
I
thinking two different kinds of art.
yeah, like a sculpturist, or the painter. I think
Yeah, I'm thinking.
so. What if I could tell my kids, and I do. We talk about it all the time. Actually, my 7-year-old is like, I'm not going to go to college. I'm like, well, you're 7, so I wouldn't say don't go to college, but it depends on
What,
what you
didn't
want
you
to do.
hear what he said?
Yeah. Or like, do you want to go to a trade school? Do you want to be a tradesman? I think I, I just don't think that there needs to be this strong push, especially because of the cost of schooling these days.
Yeah.
Some jobs, it's just not worth it. If you come out of college with over 100 grand in student debt, and and you're going to get paid $35,000 a year, like, to me, that's just an asinine. Why would you,
Oh, yeah.
you know, something needs to change. I think that it will. I think at some point something's going to give, and schools aren't going to be allowed to just charge these astronomical amounts. But I've told my kids, I'm like, if you want to be an engineer, go to school for it. If you want to be a doctor, go for it. If you want to be a lawyer, do you want to be a teacher, go for it. Do all those things. If you just don't really know what you want to do when you're 18, go to school. Just get your associates. Get general eds out of the way, or go to business school, because I feel like business, and I know it might be boring. My husband went to business school and then he transferred out, went to culinary school like 3 years in. He's like, well, business school is so boring. And I'm like, okay, well, again, you gotta kiss some frogs before you can get to your prince, because it's like, this is what life is. Life is not just like easy and then you get the best job. You have to be strategic in what you're doing. So if you don't like business school, but you don't know what you want to do, try some different jobs until you figure out what you want to do, and then go to school. I I don't know what the right answer is. I just do what I'm like. I just get along and try to work my hardest and figure it out as I go, I guess.
Well, I think that that's about as good as anybody can do. And I think that's a great place to bring it into a close, Brittany. The message of the day, I feel like, definitely being, while we don't endorse the non-consensual kissing of frogs, make sure you find some out there along your way to your prince or princess, whatever your particular bent is. Um, Everybody, we're going to be at Pack Expo. Brittany and I, we're going to be working in the same booth at the Kawasaki booth. We're going to get to see some of Iris's. In my opinion, it is the premier palletizer on the market, and we'd love to see you guys there. And Brittany, tell them where they can find your podcast.
So you can find my podcast, Automation Happy Hour, on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.
That's Automation Happy Hour. Brittany Carroll from Iris Factory Automation. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate having you on.
Thank you, Zach. I look forward to seeing you next week.
You bet. We'll see you guys later.
All right, bye.
This has been the Bot Shit Crazy podcast.